Welcome to another one of my first look videos where I show a bike up close before I've even ridden the bike. I've gotten in a ton of demo bikes lately to include this Berria Mako Sport. Now I've been reviewing some pretty high-end bikes. I just reviewed a very high-end Berria gravel bike that I was very impressed with. This is a cross-country bike that's a mid-tier cross-country bike. So it retails for about $4,400 and it's very well equipped for $4,400. So again, what I do in my first look videos is I go over the components, I talk about the things that I like so far, I complain about the things that I don't like so far before I've even ridden the bike. This is a full carbon bike, Fox suspension, SRAM components, and it looks really sweet. So let's take a close-up look at it. So full carbon frame, and I'm just a huge fan of carbon with clear coat paint jobs. I'll go ahead and say it now. One thing that bugs the heck out of me with some of these foreign bikes that I've been reviewing is they don't put frame sizes on, and I just still can't figure out the logic of it. So it bothers me enough that I'll mention it in every single one of these reviews when I do the first look. But what I do like about this bike, as with the Berria gravel bike that I reviewed, is the fact that the cable routing is super clean. So you get the cables that go inside the head tube, which I'm seeing more and more bikes that do that. And there's no cables like outside the whole bike, except for, you know, the derailleur cable comes out right there and the rear brake cable comes out just before the brake caliper. You can see it right there on the inside of the chainstay, and it just right there at the pivot, it pops out of the frame and goes right back in. So it makes for super clean lines. We'll go ahead and take a look at the suspension. So it comes with a Fox DPS rear shock. This bike comes with remote lockouts for both the front and the rear. Now, I mentioned before in my videos, I'm not a huge fan of remote lockouts. I just honestly don't think they're necessary, and it just adds complexity. But there are situations when I do use them, and particularly my cross-country bike, which came with it, not because I wanted to, but now that I've been using it, I actually really like it, especially when you pop out on a gravel road or a paved road. It's just easy to lock out the bike super quick. Now, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy here because I'm not using the remote lockout for the front because I actually had a little bit of an issue building up. The cable stop was too close to the pinch bolt, and I tried to adjust it a little bit and it just got to where it was sticky and I just gave up. I'm building too many bikes right now and I was just like, forget it. So that kind of it kind of proves my point that it just adds complexity. But you know, listen, when they work, they work. And this bike is designed so that if you have both remote lockouts running, then it's just one lever, right? So you just hit the one lever here and it locks out both the front and the rear. But for me, it'll just be locking out the rear. Front fork is a Fox Rhythm. Now this bike is 100 millimeters of travel front and rear. And it is a cross-country bike, not a down-country bike. If it was down-country, it'd have at least a 120 in the front and probably 120 in the rear. So this is a good fork. I mean, this is good suspension. Do I wish it was a 34? Yeah, I actually do. I don't run any of my personal bikes less than a 34. It's forgivable with a 100 millimeter travel fork. So, you know, if it was a 120, it would be a 34, but, you know, it keeps the front end light. So it's a personal preference, but there's definitely an advantage of a 32 in the fact that you're just going to have a lighter feeling front end. Being that it's 100, you're probably not going to get too much flex unless you're just really heavy. And if you're really heavy, then you may want to upgrade to a 34, but I think for most riders, this 32-100 is going to be just fine. So since we're talking about travel numbers, I'll go ahead and mention that the head tube angle on this bike is a 69.2. That's fairly steep by today's standards, but it is a cross-country bike, so it kind of takes it out of that down-country territory. So it's a pure cross-country bike, and the seat tube angle is about 74.5 around there, which is pretty good for a cross-country bike. My personal cross-country bike has about the same seat tube angle, and I really like it. Moving on to other component goodness, the brakes are SRAM DB8s. Never use these, so if you're not familiar with DB8s, they are a mineral oil brake. So SRAM has finally listened to us and started using mineral oil instead of DOT fluid. So I'm really stoked to try these. Now they're not as high-end as some of their other brakes. I'll report back what I think of them. Drivetrain is SRAM NX, so it's got an NX shifter and also an NX rear derailleur. It is Eagle, so it's 12-speed. The difference between like a SRAM NX group set versus the higher end XO is really just going to be weight. The performance is the same, which makes a lot of sense on a bike like this. So, you know, a $4,400 bike obviously is going to be heavier than a $7,000 bike, but you know, that's a really good purchasing option. This bike is only about 28 pounds. I weighed it just before I came out to do this review, so I used my own scale and it was right at 28 pounds. So very respectable weight. And I haven't talked about the wheels yet. I'll do that here in a minute. But if you get a bike like this, the great thing about these kind of bikes is you've got a super solid frame set, super solid group set and suspension, and then you can just upgrade the wheels down the road and drop a couple pounds and really improve the ride quality. So let's go ahead and use that as a segue to talk about the wheels. So it's a basic alloy wheel set. It's a Fulcrum wheel set. I think it's Fulcrum Red Zone. I've actually never ridden these before. I'm sure it's going to be a tubeless ready wheel set. I've got tubes in this right now. I've not converted it to tubeless yet. Not sure if I will for this review. Some of these reviews that I do where I don't have the bike that long, I don't convert the wheels to tubeless. But the tires, so let's talk about the tires. So really nice looking tire. It's a Vittoria Barzo tire. Now it says 29.25 on the tire. Looking at this tire and using a tape measure, this is not a 2.25 tire. This measures more like a little over 2. This kind of reminds me of some of the tires that we used to race back in, like, what was it, the late 90s? Some of these thin cross-country tires. So yeah, I don't know how they measured this to be a 2.25, but it is not a 2.25. So if this were my bike, you know, I'd ride these tires and then I'd probably upgrade, especially if you ride on rougher terrain. For just, you know, cross-country trails that aren't too techy, these tires will be okay. They're going to be agile as anything. I mean, the thinner the tire, the more agile it feels, but you just lose stability. So not sure how they got that 2.25 rating, but all right, let's move on. And in case you're wondering, this is a UDH compatible bike, so that's universal derailleur hanger, which most bikes are coming like that today. What's also kind of cool is it's got this little chain keeper, very, very simple. Just to keep the chain from flying up and flying off the chain ring. These narrow wide chain rings are so good today that you hardly ever drop a chain, but that will keep the chain even more secure on a rough downhill. And finishing up with the cockpit, it's a pretty basic alloy cockpit. I'll go ahead and mention, no, it did not come with an orange stem spacer. What happened was when I built this bike, I cut the fork like just a hair too long. And my son had this 3D printed stem spacer that we had to throw on. I have not had time to go to the bike shop to get a black one. So no, that's not a screw up by Berria. That's my screw up. So anyway, flat bar, you know, the stem is, it looks like it's a 90. Yeah, it says 90 right there. Decent length for cross country. If it were my bike, I'd go with a 70. Just think bikes ride better with shorter stems. And just a basic alloy seat post. And then a Physique saddle, and the wind is blowing this thing around because we got a hurricane coming through in 24 hours. Yay. All right, so that is the Berria Mako Sport. Super, super solid bike for the money. A very upgradable bike with, you know, just getting a nice wheel set down the road if you want to really lighten up the bike. If you got a race wheel set for this, like a Stan's Podium wheel set, which is my favorite race wheel set, this would be a very competitive cross-country race bike. So I'll put on a water bottle cage, my own pedals, hit the trails, and report back in a few months of what I think of this bike. So stay tuned to the channel for that. If you're not subscribed to the channel, what are you waiting for? Subscribe. Catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.